Welcome to the International Broadcast Ministry of No Limits. I am Pastor Delman, and here at No Limits, we want to help strengthen you, encourage you, and empower you to feel God's love and to live your life without limitation. Today's message is about to begin, and I want to thank you for watching and know that I'm praying for you to hear a special word from God as you watch. This sermon is not in response to a particular person or pastor or denomination. It's intended to address a particular mindset. Somebody say a mindset. A mindset in the church and a mindset in the world today. And so if you have your Bibles, I want to invite you to turn with me to the book of Hosea, chapter 1. And I want to read in your hearing verses 2 through 3. Amen. My mother told me prior to the service, she had been doing some research on the song, and she's been listening to the song, that she still needed me to kind of clarify some things. You too, Sister Screven messaged me the other day on Instagram. She said, I've been listening to the song, Pastor, really trying to see what you, trying to understand what all the fuss is about. I get it. Right there in Hosea chapter 1, beginning at verses 2 and 3, the word of the Lord reads as follows. It says, when the Lord first spake to Hosea, the Lord said to him, go, take for yourself a wife of prostitution and have children of prostitution with her. For the land commits great prostitution by forsaking the Lord. So Hosea went and took Gomer, daughter of Delman, and she conceived and bore him a son. Amen. That's it. Let's go back to verse 2. Let's look there at verse 2 again. It says that when the Lord first spoke to the preacher and the prophet Hosea, the Lord said to him, go and take for yourself a wife of whoredom, a wife of harlotry, a woman of prostitution, and have children of prostitution with her. For the land commits great prostitution by forsaking the Lord. And I want to preach today, church, with your help. And I do need your help today. Are y'all here at 11 o'clock? I want to preach today with your help, but more importantly, with the Lord's permission, from the thought, how to be a church girl. That's what I want to talk about today, how to be a church girl. Now, whether she intended to or not, Beyonce's latest song, Church Girl, has sparked a major controversy in certain quarters of the church in recent weeks. Because the title of the song uses the word church, many inside and outside of the church look with great interest as to what the singer would have to say to women about women in the church. In the intro, Beyonce uses a sample from the legendary group, the Clark Sisters song, or believe where Twinkie Clark sings, I want to be centered in God's will. And the song quickly segues by describing a church woman who goes to a party. Can you all hear me? Who goes to a party and dances provocatively and enjoys herself in ways that are, let's say, more associated with the streets than Sunday school. Here are some of the lyrics of the song. She says, I'm warning everybody, soon as I get to this party, I'm going to let go of this body. And I'm going to love on me because nobody can judge me. I was born free. Beyonce goes on to talk about twerking, which for the uninitiated is, let's just say, an uninhibited African-inspired form of dance that involves shaking the bottom to the sound and the beat of the music. That's the cleanest way I could put it. Thank you. In the song, it is peppered with adult language, and Beyonce talks about church girls acting loose and dropping it like a thotty, acting raunchy and ratchet, and closes by saying, I ain't trying to hurt nobody, just trying to bring the life up in your body. And I get the sense, based upon the opening lines, that this song about dancing and entertainment are a way for this church girl to release some of the stress that she's been carrying around. Could she pray? Perhaps. Could she read her Bible? Yes. But sometimes when carrying around so much social and personal weight, you just want to let loose sometime. And you just want to let your head down and go to a party. Okay, there are 3 honest people here today. But rather than approaching the song for its artistic quality, some in the church expressed outrage about the message of the song, calling it sacrilege, blasphemous, a sign of spiritual attack against the church, a threat to the image of holiness, and an affront to the church, and harmful to the image of Christian womanhood in the body of Christ. The song, they said, undermines the church by presenting examples of Christian femininity that celebrate promiscuity, immorality, and the profane. The song and the response to it raises a host of questions about what it means to be a church woman. How is one to live her life in a manner that is pleasing to God? Is it okay for Christian women to embrace their bodies, to affirm their sensuality, and to defy social norms of purity? Or is such behavior an indication of unholiness? Does it threaten the church and ultimately bring our community down? Can a Christian woman be saved, sanctified, and be sexually free all at the same time? Can Christian women exercise their own voices over their lives and their bodies and make their own decisions about how they dress and wear their hair and enjoy themselves after hours? I must say that I regret even having to address this subject. I do think that it is a sad commentary on the modern day Christian church that we are still talking about matters of personal piety and personal morality when there are so many more important ideas and topics for clergy and churches and Christians to be addressing. Issues like poverty and the water crisis in Jackson, Mississippi. Issues like systemic racism and threats to our democracy, and topics that some of the same clergy who are complaining about women dancing and twerking and wearing tight clothes, some of those same preachers are silent about these issues. Here we are again discussing whether Christian women are properly comporting themselves to antiquated and outdated and Eurocentric notions about purity and faith. Here we are again caught up in the same kinds of theological debates that Western Christianity and the white church in America used to justify colonialism, the transatlantic slave trade, and white supremacy. Here we are again engaging in the same kinds of debates that shift the real focus of the Bible from issues of justice and public morality to issues of personal piety and individual soul salvation. Here we are again discussing issues that enabled white Christians in America to claim to be concerned about the souls of black folk while displaying no concern, as Dr. King said, about the slums that damn them, the economic conditions that strangle them, and the social conditions that cripple them. But I'm going to do it. I'm going to wade into these waters again. I'm going to address whether it is okay for Christians to listen to certain music, to wear certain clothing, to drink certain beverages, and to do certain dances with the hopes that it will lead to a conversation after this sermon about whether we are using our power and our strength as a church to address structural racism, white supremacy and bigotry, and the systemic deprivation of opportunity for the least, the lost of the Lord's children. I am hoping that after this sermon, after I wade into this topic, we will develop the kind of critique that will wonder, why is it that while every week billions of dollars, additional dollars are being reappropriated for a war in Ukraine, meanwhile sisters and brothers in Mississippi, a city that is 80% black, don't have clean water? And I've chosen to look at this text where there's another woman who is the subject of the same kind of controversy and debate in the ancient world. A woman whose faith is called into question because of how she expresses her sensuality and her sexuality, and whether her handling of the sacred and the secular conflict with her faith and her belief in God. It's a difficult effort that I have to do homiletically because we only know this woman through the lens and the prism of the men who wrote, read, and passed down this story about her. She never speaks, she never utters a word, and actually the mention of this woman is only secondary to the larger purpose that the writer has of trying to make a comparison about idolatry in Israel and a woman who in his mind had gone astray. To make his point about idolatry, he compares Israel to a woman that he regards as being open to having sexual encounters with men. He develops in chapter 2 an allegory. An allegory is a literary tool in which the writer tries to compare one thing to another thing. Don't worry, I'm going to preach it, I'm going to teach it, then I'll preach it. And here he's trying to say that the Israelites are unfaithful to Yahweh in the same way that this sister is unfaithful to the social norms and religious expectations regarding women. The woman's name is Gomer. Can the church say Gomer? And because she does not speak, we have to excavate her. We have to reclaim her by removing the layers of tradition about her that are found in this text. And we have to try to retrieve her from underneath the rubble of all of the patriarchal perspectives and the rhetoric of religious elites about her that are contained in this passage and in the history of Christian preaching about Gomer. Preaching that assumes that the views others had about Gomer as reflected in this story tell us precisely who she was as a person. But can I tell you something? I say, can I tell you something? Just because people say something about you does not mean that's who you really are. I want you to remember that. I'm going to come back to that. Gomer, in the layer of tradition behind this story and in the history of preaching about her, is given a bad rap. And she is given a bad rap because of the way she chooses to live her life. The way she lives her life departs from and it defies the socially constructed parameters that women were expected to live in the ancient world. Behind this text are views about femininity and faith that are strict and rigid and narrow. Views that claimed that you could not be a true follower of God and interact with other religious traditions at the same time. It is a view that mainly comes from the male priesthood whose livelihood depended upon the offerings that people gave, and so to prevent their revenue from dropping, they wanted to prevent people from being exposed to other ways of thinking. I'm working on something. It was a rigid religious system wherein faith in Yahweh was treated as if people learning about other deities was a threat to the worship of Yahweh. It reflected a kind of religious insecurity of priests and priestly men about what would happen if a believer in Yahweh actually went to a party of someone who believed a different way. The priests, the leaders of the temple, wanted to control how other people related to God. It was a very narrow spiritual system. They wanted people to look a certain way, dress like this and don't wear that, read these books and don't read those. And their views about femininity were just as narrow as well. A woman's highest goal in life was to be a wife and a mother, and in particular to give her husband a male child, and so that he could pass down his wealth, his land, and his riches to his child. And so here's where Gomer comes in. And here's why Gomer is such a problem for Hosea and the male-dominated religious elite who wrote, read, and received this text. She's a problem because Gomer did not conform to the rigid rules of faith and femininity that were promulgated by the religious elite. Even though the views of the priesthood went viral on social media, Gomer was not impressed. And she was not influenced by what they said. She had her own relationship with God. She had her own ideas about what it meant to be a woman of faith. And Gomer decided what she wanted to do with her own body. Are y'all here today? And for men at that time, a woman who did not subject herself to the customs and the norms of the male-dominated leadership were a threat. And so they used metaphors and tropes about such women. They called them wives of prostitution, as is found in the New Revised Standard Version, or wives of whoredom, as in the King James translation, or wives of harlotry, as in the New King James. Even the New Living Translation calls them prostitutes. Those of you who have been in a church at any time and you have heard this passage preached, you have heard Gomer time and time again referred to as a prostitute. But what did I say earlier? Just because people say something about you does not mean that is who you really are. Are y'all here today? And I discovered that scholars tell us that the Hebrew word used for this type of woman in verse 2 is not the word prostitute. The Hebrew word is the Hebrew word zana. Can the church say zana? Zana refers not to a woman's profession, but to a woman who is sexually free. I need y'all to get this here. Old Testament scholar Catherine Sackenfeld, professor emeritus at Princeton Theological Seminary, tells us in her book, Just Wives, Stories of Power in the Old Testament and Today, that the term wife or woman of prostitution is not a reference to how a woman made her living, but instead it is a figure of speech that refers to her sexual experience. Nudge your neighbor, say, neighbor, wake up. A zana most often referred to a woman who had sexual activity prior to being married. And she did that based upon her own initiation. Zana, somebody say zana, referred to women who did not allow their lives and the decisions about their lives to be controlled and policed and dictated by the men in society. They didn't let the male-dominated culture have authority over them. Usually their father if they were unmarried, or their husband if they were married. Zana. They were not prostitutes. That was just a slanderous slur that men in society and the temple used against such strong women. It is more accurate to say that these women were sexually free. And their sexual freedom threatened men at the time. It was a very radical move for a woman, Hazana, for a woman to say that she would make her own decisions about her bodies. It was a subtle yet a radical move for a woman to say to her dad, to her priest, her family, and to her community, I am not going to allow society, my religion, and the government control my mind, my life, and my decisions about my body. Y'all not here. The reason such women were considered a problem is that in a pre-scientific world, a world before paternity tests, the only way that men felt that they could guarantee the paternity of their rightful heirs was to make sure that girls and the women that they married were virgins. Such restrictions regarding sex, y'all, and the creation of the institution of monogamy was not about morality, but about property. It was about men making sure that their land, their cattle were passed down to the rightful child of their birth. All y'all here? And so Hosea's dilemma is that God tells him not to marry a prostitute, but to marry a woman who is so strong and so independent that he is uncertain if she will be the kind of woman that will submit to his authorities or not. There are stories about men in the antiquity noticing that the child who inherited their property looked more like their neighbor than themselves. Y'all not here. The last thing that a man wanted to do was to take his 3-year-old son to the barber shop and to look up and to realize that the boy looks more like the guy sitting in the second chair than himself. Y'all not here. The last thing you could do is say, nobody in my family got that head and got them ears. And so they were worried and wanted to control such liberated women. So men expressed their insecurities by such women by calling them names, by slandering them, and by using slurs to tear down the reputation of strong women. You know the words that people use about strong women that they cannot control? I cannot use these words from the pulpit, but if you meet me in the parking lot afterwards, I'll share them to you. One of those words begins with a B, rhymes with itch. Another word, it is a diminutive of the word whore, and is a common garden tool. Another word that comes to mind is a 4-letter word that begins with the word S and rhymes with smut. And so this phrase, woman of whoredom, a wife of prostitution, is just like that. It is a slanderous slur. It is not a reference to who she really was. It is just a reflection of the ideas and views of insecure men. And whenever men see a woman who was strong, who was empowered, and not afraid to speak up and use their voice and to make their own decision about their bodies, they said she was getting out of line, and they called her one of these slurs. That's what's happening to Gomer in the text. She is a forerunner, glory to God, of a long line of strong black women like Beyonce that men feel they cannot control. And as a result, it causes men like Hosea to question whether she is the type of a woman who is worthy of being called his first lady. The male writer of the book of Hosea and the predominantly male audience that read it used this slur about sexually empowered women who would not conform to the rules of men in power. Virgins were women who submitted control over their bodies to their fathers or their husbands. They were deemed good girls, good church girls, you might say, operated within the social, the cultural, and religious system and gave the power over their lives, to the men in their lives. But Gomer, I want to suggest to you today, is a good church girl as well. Yeah. Gomer felt empowered to make her own choices. And while some men may have been threatened by her, Gomer models for us that there's not just one way to be a church girl. Yeah, Gomer is a part of a long line of sacred sisters, past and present, who didn't want to wear long dresses, who did not want to keep long hair, who liked wearing makeup every now and then, who had opinions about their education, their career, their money, that didn't care about having babies or waiting to have sex until they got married. Women like Gomer challenged the prevailing idea that a woman who is strong and independent and sexually free is somehow a threat to the order of the day. And I want to suggest that rather than us demonizing Gomer and women like her, we ought to reclaim them. Rather than shaming such women who fall outside of what is considered customary, we ought to reclaim women like Gomer today. We ought to view such women also as an example of women of faith, women who love themselves and embrace their bodies and make their own decisions about their lives, including their sexuality, and none of that threatened or is an affront to their relationship with God. Y'all not here. I want to suggest to you today that Gomer models for us what it means to be a good church girl as well. Gomer is a strong, beautiful black woman who didn't let society, men, or institutional religion put constraints and limitations on how they lived. That's a church girl. A church girl is a woman of faith who has a voice and doesn't mind using it. A church girl is a woman who doesn't mind saying it loud, even if it makes others uncomfortable when they see that. Y'all not here today. If you are uncomfortable with how a church girl dresses, if you are uncomfortable with how she dresses and responsibly handles her sensuality, that is not her problem, that is your problem. This sermon is about who gets to define what it means to be a church girl. And Gomer shows us that a church girl avoids the trap of letting patriarchal views of men, the ecclesiastical views of institutional religion, and the sexist views of society delimit your options and silence your voice. A church girl is a church woman who lets God define her. I'm working on something. God chose a woman like Gomer because she did not let androcentric society become the arbiter of her womanhood. Church girls realize that scripture and not tradition is the sole authority over their lives. And scripture teaches that we are all made in the image of God and not the image of men. And when women grasp that, they realize that their value is not determined by whether there's a ring on their finger. They realize that their value is determined not by their relationship to a man, whether she's married or whether she's given birth. She realizes that her worth extends beyond the womb, that her life journey is not just about being barefoot and pregnant. That's what I want my daughters to realize, that you are somebody, whether you connected to a man or not. Have I got a witness here? That's why we have a woman of color as the second in command of these yet to be United States of America, because she understood that she could do more than just be a wife and a mother. Woo. So sisters, don't let men, whether in the pulpit, in a collar, or in the barber shop, or Congress or the Supreme Court police and control and restrict your estimation of who you are. You're a child of the King. Somebody pat yourself on the chest and say, I'm a child of the King. Gomer has been villainized for too long. She wasn't a promiscuous woman. That's what her op said about her, and said she's a real heroine of the tech. We got to dig for Gomer, because what we know about her is the superficial level, and the superficial level reflects the views of her haters, and the fact that she decides to live her life free from the policies, the practices, and the perspectives of men really raises another question that I've been struggling with all week. If God calls Hosea to find a woman who is sexually free and is not a virgin to marry, how does Hosea know that Gomer suits that bill? Y'all missed that. If God says, I want you to go find a strong sister who is sexually liberated. I mean, this isn't 2022 where people post their sexual exploits on their social media pages. No, this is antiquity. You didn't go around posting your private life. Are y'all hearing? So I was wondering, how then does the preacher know that Gomer qualifies? Y'all not here, y'all not here. Let me talk to the guys. Come on. Y'all know, hey, I've surmised that either Hosea or someone in his close circle must have either slept with or have been sleeping with her to know that she was a good candidate. Y'all missed that. I'm going to let y'all think about that this week. So this slur then about Gomer really then exposes the hypocrisy of the prophet in the pulpit and the men around him. So when men start using slurs about strong women who aren't conforming, what they are doing is they are really telling on themselves. Y'all not here. I've been wondering, why is it so easy for some men in the church listening to Beyonce's song to malign strong women like her? Why is it so easy for people in the church to malign strong women who are comfortable with their bodies? I thank God for Gomer, and I thank God for Beyonce's song Church Girl, for they show us that church women don't have to get permission from men or from preachers or from bishops or from apostles or from any ecclesiastical body to tell them how to be a woman of faith. Have I got a witness here? Let God define you. Come on, nudge your neighbor, say neighbor. Let God define you. That's my only point today. Don't let your friends, don't let Facebook and Twitter, don't let Instagram and Snapchat and TikTok tell you who you are. Have I got a witness here? It doesn't matter what a pastor or a bishop or a church thinks about whether a woman can dance or should go to a club. As a matter of fact, there is no biblical prohibition in the Bible about going to a party and dancing anyway. And I find that most people who are prohibiting these behaviors are doing so because they are unable to dance anymore themselves. Don't let religious folk put you in a box. If it's one thing that God has called me to do, it is to set the captives free from the bondage and the yoke of traditionalism and parochial ideas about what it means to be a child of God. I want people to know that you can love God without being weird. I remember I remember some time ago, I remember some years ago, I remember some years ago, I was at this this lounge restaurant, popular lounge restaurant in town. It was during Congressional Black Caucus. And I was having a meal there, listening to music, of course, but having a meal there with some colleagues. And I noticed that as I was having dialogue with these colleagues, there was a brother over in the corner of the room that was looking at me. And he kept staring at me for a long time. 5-7 minutes are going by, Reverend Rice. And I'm wondering, why in the world is this brother looking at me this long? I mean, I could perhaps fathom. I thought perhaps he was a member of the church and was just surprised and interested in seeing the pastor out. Out in public. And after about 15 minutes, I guess his curiosity got the best of him. And so he came up to me and he tapped me on the shoulder and he said, "Hey, Reb, what you got in that glass?" He thought he had me. So I said, "Just Tito's and lemon juice." That's my preference. And I said, "Now that I have satiated your curiosity, can I get back to my discussion with my colleagues about how we're going to deal with voter suppression and how we're going to deal with the fact that right now there are state legislatures that are trying to turn back the hands of time so that resources are diverted from our communities. Can I get back to my discussion with my brethren about the things that really matter?" In this season of your life. My parents are here, so I'm sure they're wondering, that's very interesting. In this next season, church, we've got serious battles to address. And we've got to stop allowing people to put us in a box. And maybe you're a church girl and you've been shamed and you've been silenced and people have tried to shame you because of how you look and how you dress and who you like and who you love. Whatever your story is, don't let the world define you. Let God do it. Look at your neighbor and say, "Neighbor, let God do it." And that's why I like Gomer, because Gomer let God define her. When you study Gomer, you'll discover that Gomer in Hebrew means complete. Can the church say complete? Yeah. Glory to God. And so that shouted me when I read it, because even though Gomer is demonized and shamed by the church, by religious folk, because of her strength, she was able to rely on what God calls her. Gomer understood that it's not what people call you that matters. It's what you answer to. Don't let church folks shame you, child of God. Have I got a witness here? The other day I saw this entire Instagram page that was dedicated to presenting the image of the perfect Christian woman. It encouraged Christian women to be modest and to stop having opinions that you share with your husbands and your boyfriends. It was telling Christian women, if you want to be a good Christian woman, be submissive and walk in purity. And what the site failed to realize is that holiness is not about the clothes you wear on the outside. Holiness is about the qualities you possess on the inside. Have I got a witness here? I've discovered over the course of my life that the women with the longest dresses, Lord have mercy, let me move on past that. Holiness, have I got a witness here? Holiness is not about what you have in your cup. It's about whether what's in your cup has you. Have I got a witness here? And Gomer models for us that you can be a strong, independent woman without it nullifying your relationship with God. Have I got a witness here? This is important for us to deal with today, church,
Because not only are we dealing with the resurgence of racism in America, but we are also seeing the revival of sexist ideas about women and relationships in society. I find it disturbing to see popular relationship gurus on social media blaming many of the problems in the black community on black women. They characterize black women as being too angry and too combative and too independent, and they suggested if black women would just be more submissive like other cultures, then maybe black men would be more likely to choose them and the black community would be stronger. The devil is a liar. Listen, brothers, if your view of manhood depends upon you controlling a woman, then you don't have that much manhood. Have I got a witness here? And there are too many men who would rather dominate women rather than seeing them as equals and learning how to communicate and relate to them. Can I say something? I said, can I say something? The need to dominate women and the fragility of the sexist ethos is a demonic spirit that needs to be rejected. It is a stronghold that needs to be torn down. Because some of the same people saying that Beyonce's song is out of line speech are the same people that encourage women to stay in abusive marriages. Y'all not here today. The same ones saying that this song is out of line are the same ones who have no problem receiving women's money to fund the church, but don't want women to have an equal voice in running the church. Y'all got quiet. Gomer shows us that in the end, God is the only judge. I think Beyonce is probably on to something when she says in the song, nobody can judge me. Come on, wake your neighbor up and say, neighbor, nobody can judge me. We live in a society and in a culture where everybody seems to be looking for public validation. We want likes and clicks. We want followers and friends. But can I tell you something? There's only one approval we should all seek to obtain when it is all said and done. When we get to the end of our days, we ought to want to hear him say, well done, my good and faithful servant. Have I got a witness? Is there anybody here when you get down to the end of your days, you want them to say, well done, my good and faithful servant? And by chapter 3, the much maligned Gomer in chapter 1 is redeemed in chapter 3. And God is the one who redeems her. Hosea doesn't do it. The temple doesn't do it, but God did it. Is there anybody here who can testify when I think about how God picked me up and how God turned me around and placed my feet on higher ground? God did it. Come on, slap high five with your neighbor and say, neighbor, I'm still standing, I'm still running, I'm still fighting, I'm still insisting, and God did it. You might criticize me and you might count me out, but God has the final word. Have I got a witness? And you might slur me, you might call me everything but a child of God. But God is not through with me yet. And so, sisters, if you're looking for somebody to follow the tradition of Gomer and be a church girl and let God define you. Follow the tradition of Vashti and speak truth to power. Follow the tradition of Deborah and pursue positions of power. Follow the tradition of Esther and free your people. If you need a tradition to follow, follow the tradition of the virtuous woman and make a name for yourself in the marketplace. Follow the tradition of Maya Angelou, who wrote, "You may write me down in history with your bitter, twisted lies. You may tread me in the very dirt, but still, like dust I rise. Does my sassiness upset you? Why are you upset in gloom? Because I walk like I've got oil wells pumping in my living room, just like moons and like suns, with the certainty of tides, just like hope springing high. Still, I rise. Look at your neighbor and say, neighbor, I might be down, but I'm coming out. Still, I rise. I'ma dance like I'm rising. I'ma preach like I'm rising. I'ma praise him like I'm rising. Still, I rise. Yeah, yeah. Push your neighbor and say, neighbor, don't let the devil stop you. Don't let the enemy keep you down. Rise, rise. Yeah, yeah. Hallelujah, hallelujah. Keep rising. Keep standing. Don't let the world delimit who you are because of their insecurities. You know, it's not what they call you that matters. It's what you answer to. And just because they said she was a prostitute doesn't mean that she was. That was just a reflection of insecure people. Glory to God. I want you to get that. So listen. Can we kind of move beyond these narrow parochial views about what it means to be a believer? I mean, if you don't want to listen to the song, don't listen to it. If you don't want to dance, don't dance. It's okay. But don't demonize somebody else because their knees are still working. Their knees are just still working. Don't let that jealousy, you wish you could drop it. You just can't drop it no more. Can we move beyond that so that we can start dealing with the bigger and broader issues that are affecting our community, that are impacting the world today? Don't let people define you. Women, men, otherwise. Let God define you.
No Limits was created to help you strengthen your relationship with Jesus and to help you explore the limitless possibilities for your life. Connect with me today through our website at delmancoats.org. There you will find free resources available for immediate download with no obligation whatsoever. I begin each day thanking God for you and those like you who watch and support this ministry. It is truly a blessing to serve you. Once again, you can find us at delmancoats.org. That's delmancoats.org. And remember, to live your life each day with no limits. Join me as we travel to Egypt and Dubai in the spring of 2023. Together, we will explore the Great Pyramids of Giza and learn the hidden history of one of the world's greatest ancient civilizations. We will cruise the ancient Nile like the pharaohs once did and disembark at iconic sites such as the Aswan Islands, the Valley of the Kings, and the famous Egyptian Museum of Antiquities. And after we've explored Egypt, we will head to Dubai and explore this great modern city. This is truly the trip of a lifetime, and I hope that you'll join me on this journey. Go to delmancoats.org for more information and to register. But don't delay, as space is limited on this tour. I want to thank you for watching today, and I'll see you right here next week for a new episode of No Limits. I am so glad that you took the time to watch this message today. If you have been blessed by this outreach, I'd like to ask you to become a partner in this ministry so that together we can reach the world for Jesus Christ. My heart is to reach people just like you all around the world and to tell them that God loves them and wants to empower them to live a life with no limits. Your financial investment in this ministry will enable us to spread the good news of Jesus Christ around the world so that more people can be inspired and encouraged. Will you help me to reach those people? Will you join me in empowering the lost and the forgotten? Will you be my partner as we teach people to truly live a life with no limits? To make a donation safely and securely, go to our website at delmancoats.org. That's delmancoats.org. And look for the donate button on the top right of the homepage. Thank you in advance for your support and for becoming a true partner in No Limits. Your partnership and financial gift will help us impact the world by bringing hope to those who need it. Your generosity today is a reminder of the goodness of God. Thank you again for watching No Limits with Pastor Delman.
The preceding program was brought to you by the faithful supporters of No Limits and Mount Enon Baptist Church in Clinton, Maryland.